Here we are, the second podcast of many more. I'm with Rita, I'm Darren, and we are...
Don't do I'm Rita and Darren. Nobody does it.
You don't do that. That's enough. Don't worry about it. Let's go.
I thought where we start this conversation today is covering a topic that is central to the work we've been doing for the last 5.5 years, right? So I am firmly into my middle age, and you are teetering on the edge of being an elder.
I'm a half centurion, thank you.
Yes, so we've got enough rungs on the board to look back at life with a very particular question in mind, and that is, what do you think was the hardest stage of life, right? And not only what the hardest stage of life was, but why was it hard? And more importantly, and this again ties into the work we do, what wisdom, what life lesson, what knowledge would have helped make it easier? Because the whole point of what we've been doing with Willow the Wonderer Series has been creating these stories that are imbued with seeds of wisdom that we feel would be very helpful for children as they grow up and as they become adults, as they navigate life. So do you want to kick us off?
Sure. When I look back, I think there's lots of difficult chapters in my life, from a toddler to an adult, and at the time they all seem bad, and at each stage I didn't have any wisdom to navigate my way through. So commensurate with my age, they were all quite difficult times. But I think as an adult now, I think looking back at my whole life, it probably would have been my teens. And I think that's probably because I was in that transition between a child and an adult. And I think they're really quite formative years where your hormones are going nuts. And you're just starting to realize that you have to depend on yourself, and you are responsible for yourself ultimately, and you have to take a bit more responsibility. I think that was really daunting through my teens, realizing that at some point pretty soon I'll be leaving home and have to get a job and fend for myself. And while that was going on, of course, the hormones were changing rapidly and coursing through my veins, and you became very self-conscious, and I started to look at my identity and who I was compared to everyone else. A bit more self-conscious about the way I looked and the way I dressed. If I had a pimple, I didn't want to go outside. It was horrendous.
It is a terrible time, isn't it? And you're not just self-conscious about yourself, you're self-conscious about everyone around you, your parents. It feels like everything they say and do almost feels quite embarrassing at that stage. And they almost cannot say and do anything that feels right to you, does it?
No, I think for me it was the hormones at the time. I just felt angry. I think my body psychology just hadn't quite settled. And I think, it's probably a difficult time.
Does wisdom have any place in there? Is there anything in there that you now think, well, had I known that, it would have helped?
I think, and this goes for every stage of life, I think had I been told that life is ebbs and flows, the bad times will come, but then they'll leave, and then you'll have the good times, and they'll leave. And I think I was not really conscious of that. I think when I was in this situation, it became all so encompassing, and I never saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I, on a physiological level, assumed that's how it is, infinitum. I wasn't actually conditioned to think, hey, this is just a moment in time and it'll pass, and then next week you'll have a different perspective on it. But when I'm in the moment, I can't see that. And I think in retrospect, I wish I'd had that knowledge that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that life ebbs and flows, and the good times, the bad times, they fluctuate and they come and go. And I think that would have helped me.
Yeah.
How about you?
I agree with you that that whole coming of age phase is a really daunting phase, and probably one where we suffer the most. And a lot of that suffering is, I think, self-inflicted. But what was interesting for me was I did not go through that phase during my teenage years. I think that's partly cultural and it's partly personality driven, because through school I was very academically oriented, and I know a lot of kids like me who are very focused. We are the sort of people who are a bit nerdy, who like studying and who bought into the whole story, and it's not a bad story that you study hard, you work hard, you get good grades, and then you get a good job, and that's what schooling is about. And a lot of our identity gets tied into that. And similarly, after school I went to university and was completely immersed in my studies and focused on doing well. So it wasn't until my early 20s, when I had left university and started working, that I had that sort of freedom in my life to think and realize, okay, so I've achieved the one singular goal I had. That's when it sort of became interesting for me that the structure that studies and academia provided was gone, right? Schools and universities provide a structure, and that was gone. And so the corporate environment, and I worked in a corporate role, the corporate environment is a completely different beast. You're with a group of people and in an environment where not everyone has your best interest at heart. In a school environment, you still have a very strong correlation between working hard, getting the grades, which is your rewards, right? And the measure of your success is more objective. Once you start working in a corporate environment, that correlation starts to fall down. It becomes more fuzzy. And if you transfer that high achiever energy from a school environment to a work environment, you start feeling, well, I'm going to work really hard and climb up the corporate ladder really fast. And so you put a lot of pressure on yourself to excel very quickly. And inevitably, these rewards don't come through as fast or as clearly as they did in your school environment. The annual performance appraisal cycle used to be torturous for me. And I just felt that so much was held back from me. Whatever I did was never enough. It was just never clear what you had to do to get the full bonus or get the promotion. The process just left you feeling a bit underwhelmed in yourself and just generally. So that early adulthood, when you are establishing yourself in a career, for me was very torturous. When I look back at it now, and if anybody looks at my resume, objectively you'll say that I did pretty well. Every 18 months, I was progressing up the corporate chain. I was getting my pay rises and I was doing well, as well as you can hope to. But I never felt that I was doing well. So it wasn't just because the corporation did something to me or there were bad actors that threw spanners in the work. A lot of it was self-inflicted. And I remember a moment at home. So by this stage, I'm in my late 20s. I've bought my own apartment. I'm establishing myself as well as I can in life. And I was just really miserable about something or another one weekend. And a part of me just turned around and asked myself, what will it take? When will you be happy? And I realized that a lot of the suffering was self-inflicted.
Was this before you did anything formal, got any formal teaching, any yoga, did any retreats?
No, I wasn't really spiritual at that stage. In my 20s, I became quite agnostic, I guess is the best word, to a lot of the religious conventions I had grew up with. And that was the other part of the suffering. The whole question of identity for me really only came in that period when I had achieved financial independence, because it's the financial independence that brought me personal freedom, right? And again, that's very cultural, I think. But it's only then that I had to start making choices about how I'm going to live, and I realized that I wasn't going to follow the traditional paths.
You mean a traditional Fijian Indian path?
You could say traditional Fijian Indian, but I think it's a traditional path. Everybody in our culture goes to school, gets the degree, gets the job, pairs up, gets married, has kids, starts a family. That's the traditional path to me. And I think that's agnostic culturally. And so I was getting to a stage in my 20s where I felt I actually don't want to get married. I don't necessarily want the traditional path of marriage and family and child raising, because I have no idea who I am and what this life is going to be about. And because I had come from such a big family, I could see that just marriage and kids did not necessarily make someone happy. Well, it was one of the things you did, but it wasn't a be all and end all. Do you know what I mean?
Everyone's nodding now at home watching this.
No, and to present it as some sort of remedy for life, that this is what you do and you'll be happy, which is the matter of fact way it's presented in Indian families.
Or in all cultures.
Yeah, it just didn't resonate with me. And the moment I realized that I may not go down that path, I don't want to go down that path, not yet anyway, right? Suddenly all questions of identity and values were thrown up in the air, because now I have different views on what is a moral life, what is an ethical life, and what is a good life. And it was answering those questions whilst dealing with this disappointment of a corporate life that kind of contributed in my early 20s to a lot of suffering. And that question that I asked myself, when will it be enough, was a very important one, because it's answered the next question, it'll never be enough. You know, there was that big gaping hole, and no matter what I did out in the material world, unless something changed within me, nothing would be enough. And realizing that then set me down the path of exploring, what do I have to do to change this mindset, to change this constant wanting and needing and not receiving.
But there weren't any really harder times up until then?
No, because as I said, I bought into the whole path of you just study hard, you get good grades, that's what school is for. And I blocked everything else out. And we didn't have too much freedom in our teenage years, like you probably did, to really question our sense of identity too much. You are dependent on your parents, and your parents have told you that this space is about studying and establishing yourself in life, and I bought into that. And it was good advice in hindsight. I'm not criticizing it.
Yeah.
But the sort of freedom to really think about who I am and how I'm going to live my life happened in my 20s. And that's when the realization dawned on me that there's a lot about life that I actually don't know. And because I don't know, I'm just reacting to life. I'm not living it. And I'm reacting with disappointment, I'm reacting with wanting, I'm running away from things rather than having a clear idea of what is it that I should be going towards.
Right. So when do you think you first would have liked to have the insights of wisdom that you have now? At that age, when you were in your 20s, going through that?
I thought about it. I'm not.
And how would you have dealt it with the situations differently?
I've thought about this question. I think in context of the work we are doing, does knowing wisdom earlier really help? Or do you have to suffer to really internalize the learning? And I think it would have helped to have some guideposts. It would have helped to have been taught a little bit about Stoics and their view on life, learning a little bit about Eastern traditions, learning about the philosophies underpinning Buddhism, understanding the basis of things like happiness, things like contentment. These are elements you cultivate in your mind. You have to practice being happy. You have to practice being content.
And nobody's teaching you at school, or no, it's not.
No,
they're not the messages in the mass media growing up.
No, and that's
generally, your parents are probably too busy and strung out to.
No, the conditioning you get as a child is that the reward will be something external, i.e., getting the grade, getting the prize, getting the scholarship. That's your reward.
Yeah.
So when you graduate from school into a work environment, you're still looking outside. You're looking at your employer to give you that gratification. That, I've worked hard, so now you give me a good performance review and give me a good bonus. And even if you are working with the best people in the world, they have to moderate the awards that's given out, right? Because in a corporate environment, they try to minimize and manage the employee expense line. So you're never going to get enough. So there's a suffering, there's a special kind of suffering, and I've seen other high achievers who came after me go through a similar cycle and have that shock kind of realization that, hang on, I've given my 120% and you're not promoting me to the next level already.
I think even if you got there to the top level, you'd still come to the same realization.
Yeah.
That it's something that you have to be happy with inside. I had a similar cathartic moment when I'd got a full page in an international award annual. It's called the American Illustration Annual, and there was just a select, maybe 20 or 30 illustrators worldwide get chosen per year. And it was one of those books that I'd pored over as a student, and I'd see these gods of illustration presented before me, and they were icons to me. I thought, wow, if I ever reached that level, the heavens would open up and the angel would sing and I would enlighten. And that happened in my, I think, early 20s. I remember getting the book on my desk and seeing my work alongside the same gods, and I was totally deflated. I felt like I'd just been directed down a path that ultimately wasn't going to give me that contentment, that inner contentment, which I always thought it would. And I worked really, for decades, really hard, very myopically to reach that point. And I just wish that in the children's books that I'd read when I was younger, that lesson was in it, that ultimately you have to find that contentment from within, and it won't come from being a god of illustration or whatever.
So that was the biggest wisdom I felt that was missing, that happiness comes from within. Whether you call it happiness, whether you call it contentment, whether some people call it peace, whether you call it joy, whatever word resonates with you, that feeling is something that has to be cultivated. And the word cultivate is very important, because what it means is it's something you have to grow. And that growth comes from practice, right? Being happy comes from practicing being happy, from not being discontent, from just accepting things as they are and learning to be content with what you have and what is. And that's something we all have to practice at. Whereas society likes to condition us, and I don't think there's any sort of bad intent, it's just everybody's on the same treadmill. The conditioning we all tend to receive is that validation, that reward, that feeling of happiness will come when you achieve something, when you do something, when you please someone. It's always external, and that's how we are brought up. So that to me was the fundamental insight and fundamental wisdom that I wish somebody had told me. So that was why I insisted that the ending of book 1 be what it was, that happiness comes from within. And because it's a state you can cultivate, it actually knows no bounds. Why should it be bounded when it's something that you can generate from within yourself?
Yeah, I think that there's also a case for explaining to children. I wish, and again, I'm thinking of myself as a child and what I would have said to that 5-year-old, or maybe a 7-year-old Darren. I'd say, because there was always, I was always worrying about something. Whether it would have been I'd have to wear glasses to school, or wear shorts to school, or have to go to the dentist, and it'd always be all consuming to me at the time. And I always felt that life was problematic. And I think it's because somewhere along the line, I was told that life was meant to be perfect. And so I had this expectation and then fought back against the harder times. And I think looking back, had I been told that, hey, life isn't meant to be all joyful, or life is about as much the sad times and the good times, and they're equal, and I should embrace both of them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that would have helped me.
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
sure
that
whether I could
understanding.
intellectualize it when I was that young, but just as someone to say that, hey, life is,
It changes.
it's like the Buddhists say, life is suffering. And once I realized that, accepted as an adult, that life is suffering, then I didn't suffer as much because I wasn't expecting it to be any different. Suddenly this weight came off my shoulders.
And suffering, a lot of people criticize the translation of the words. It's discontent. There is an element of things changing and things that you don't want. Unpleasant things will happen to you in life.
I'm not having the peace of mind, I guess.
Yeah. So I actually wanted to ask you, so you said teenage years were difficult, right? Because you're very self-conscious and a lot of things are changing and you try to get a sense of who you are and how you navigate all that. So if in the midst of that storm, somebody had tried to give you advice and wisdom, would it have helped? Or do you think it's better doing what we are doing, trying to create stories where a lot of these seeds are planted very early in the life, because we're doing picture books. These are stories that are read to kids between 3 to 5 to 8 years of age, right? When they're more innocent, they're not quite dealing with all these kind of changes, physical changes, biological changes, emotional changes. They're still, innocent little kids running around with very little kids in the world, and they're just enjoying a good story that has all these little seeds in them. What do you think is better, or what do you think works?
Well, I think you're never too early. I would have never been too early to learn these lessons. Again, it's hard to judge it, but I think any kind of tool that you've got, any kind of condition or knowledge or lesson or words ringing loud in the back of your head helps any situation to navigate through them. But just the idea that things are transitional and there is light at the end of the tunnel, and you're not going to feel the same next week. It'll be another time and another place, and you'll feel differently. It's not infinitum the way you're feeling right now, and I think that's
and nobody had these conversations with us, did they? So I firmly believe it's good to have that wisdom embedded in our psyche, in our mind when we are very little, because the other aspects get embedded in our mind when we are very little. This whole idea, this whole conditioning of study hard, work hard, and you'll do well in life and you'll be happy was an idea that was embedded in my mind when I was very little. And it got reinforced through school and through years.
And mine, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I think just the discipline, the working hard, it got me to a stage in life where I could realize these things really quickly, and I wasn't struggling materially in life, and I could reflect.
I completely agree, but that's been the point of the work we've been doing. The narratives in the mainstream are incomplete. They're not necessarily wrong, they're just incomplete. Because the other side of that is, yes, you'll establish yourself materially and you will be materially comfortable, but there's a mental, emotional, psychological side. And so we are given all the training to establish ourselves with material comfort, but the training around the emotional comfort, the psychological comfort, that's what's missing in the mainstream narrative. And as you said, I don't think it's very incompatible, right? You give children a sense that you'll have to balance it both worlds. You have to work hard, study hard, earn your money, establish yourself so you can live a comfortable life. But on the other side, don't neglect this mind, that emotional world that you have, because that state of mind can be completely different to whatever your material reality is.
Yeah. And so I think we did cover this in book 2, Honey Time, to stop and smell the roses while you are on that career curvature. taking on the world and winning and doing well and winning awards, stop and treasure the moments, because you'll never get them back. I think I lost a whole decade before I achieved that milestone where I really wasn't much to myself or anyone. I was just focused on career and didn't really stop and smell the roses and take interest in other things. And I think I didn't have much of a balance in my life, and I regret not being more consciously present of what I was doing and understanding that this isn't going to give me the enlightenment and ultimate happiness that I was after, but I should just still pursue this goal because it's still a noble effort. But enjoy my time, I think. And I didn't really enjoy my time, even though I was winning and scoring goals.
Because we've used the word suffering a bit. I would say as much as difficult as when I think back now, the 20s felt, of course there were moments of just elation and joy as well. I was happy working where I was. It was what I had worked towards for so long. And I worked with good people and I had a great time. It was very satisfying to be able to earn a good salary and help out my family established in Australia. It was wonderful at a personal level to buy my first apartment and settle into that. So there were moments of achievement and joy. But the backdrop to that was also a lot of discontent. In spite of achieving these very important milestones and being able to do these things that were very important to me, there was still that discontent. And that's what's interesting to me. That's when I started seeing that it's not these big goals and attainment of these goals. That was a clue that there's more to life than just achieving things, and thus began the journey, right? It was important to have that suffering, that realization, because that what then pushed me along the path to explore sort of other wisdom traditions, philosophical traditions, contemplative traditions. And that has just enriched my life, and hopefully through the stories that we are putting together, it enriches many more lives to come. That's all we can hope.
Yeah. I think just in wrapping up, I think for me also was the realization that your mind is a muscle and you can train it in a certain way. So, yeah, you can tell it to act a certain way and it will. And it can be your best friend or it can be your worst enemy. I think that's a choice you can make. You can make your mind work for you in a very positive way, or you can make it work for you in a negative way. And it's just a matter of teaching it and availing yourself of the right literature, like Willow the Wonderer.
Just blatant plug. So if I had to summarize and wrap up the conversation, the place where we both agree, looking back in life at what was the hardest stage, it was that stage in life, and it happened at different times for both of us, where we were coming of age, where we have to make choices for ourselves on who we are, what we're going to be, and how we're going to live our lives. And having some wisdom, having some markers that say this is what makes for a fulfilling life can be very helpful and can alleviate a lot of suffering, if not save you a lot of time. And that's the whole point of what we are trying to do with Willow the Wonderer Series. We are trying to plant some of these universal, timeless seeds of wisdom into young children's minds, so that when they do get to that stage in life, there's something in their psyche that guides them, that tells them that maybe this is the way to go.
Yeah. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
That's our thoughts. That's what we feel when we look back on our life. What do you think? Is there a particular phase of life that you felt was more difficult than the others? Is there a wisdom that you think would have helped go through that phase in a more balanced way? And when do you think would have been a good time to learn that wisdom? Let us know your thoughts, and it'll help us see if we've missed anything.
Yeah, and also any questions about the content of this talk, whether you agree with certain aspects of it, and whether you want us to explain things a bit more, or you rebuke what we said in any way. We're happy, we're open.
Just be kind when you leave comments now.
Yeah.
Or to business.
Otherwise I'll find you.
Thank you for listening.